Rematch is on. It is going to be Cody Rhodes defending the WWE Undisputed title against Solo Sikoa in a steel cage match next week on the SmackDown on USA debut. Yes, this was the final edition of SmackDown on Fox, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. As you can tell, traveling again, so don't have my usual setup, so this may not be too lengthy of a reaction video, but there really wasn't a lot to react to on this week's edition of SmackDown outside of sort of the main story, which was getting the rematch for Solo Sikoa to try to bring back that undisputed title to the Bloodline. Will it happen? You guys know I don't think it's going to happen, but it is at least interesting, and I know this was a rematch, as we talked about in a video this week, that not a lot of people necessarily wanted to see based on how things played out at SummerSlam. You knew going into the SummerSlam match it was really all going to be about the return of Roman Reigns, and the question is it going to be the same this time around? I think what you do have to work with here that makes this a little bit better of a situation than the one you had at SummerSlam, that was Bloodline Rules. I think people already knew what to expect from a Bloodline Rules match because we had saw it at WrestleMania 40. But now, this is a steel cage match, right? And there are different things now you can do with the rematch. And, you know, at least on the on the surface, it keeps the Bloodline out of it. It keeps anyone else out of the match, but we know how this works. That is likely not to happen. You would fully expect there still to probably be some sort of interference, maybe, or do they just keep this straight up and have Cody versus Solo inside the cage? Cody beats him clean, and then maybe that's where the shenanigans begin after the match, where somehow, you know, Jacob Fatu and everyone else gets involved, and then that is maybe where you get the big either return of Roman Reigns, you get someone else coming back that we haven't seen in a while, whether it's Jimmy Uso, Paul Heyman, those kind of things. So I think it's going to be very intriguing to see which direction the WWE goes with here because, again, we've talked about this multiple times now, right? Remember, Roman Reigns was advertised for that show next week in Seattle for the SmackDown on USA debut. However, he was pulled from that advertisement after the beatdown from the Bloodline, and, you know, there's plenty of speculation. Does that mean that he's not going to be there, or does that mean they pulled him for him to once again kind of be a big surprise return here? Because I think everyone kind of knew he was returning at SummerSlam, but I think you at least have somewhat of that doubt now that he could be on this show next week, and I think that helps the main event a little bit and maybe makes it a little bit more unpredictable in terms of who you're going to see out there versus the actual finish of the match, which is going to be Cody Rhodes retaining the Undisputed title against Solo Sikoa. So I think the way they're doing this is fine. Like I said before, I know it's just a challenge, right? Of no one actually thinks Solo is going to win the championship, but I did like the tease that they did by adding in Jacob Fatu, right? At first, you had Solo stepping up to Cody, and Cody's like, hang on a second. I don't think, you deserve an undisputed title. He's like, you deserve it. And he's talking to Jacob Fatu. And so I thought that was an interesting thing to add in because you also know what you saw there. Jacob Fatu looks like he's salivating over the opportunity to get that undisputed title match against Cody because maybe he thinks he's the one that has the best chance of bringing that championship back to the Bloodline. But whenever Jacob Fatu steps up on the apron, what happens? Solo kind of talks him back down. And so I thought that was a nice added touch because it continues to kind of tease the idea that at some point in the future, Jacob Fatu is going to turn on Solo Sikoa. And the problem maybe for WWE is when he does that, Jacob Fatu might be the biggest babyface in the company for a lot of people. But that's where we've talked about before. Is that where you get The Rock and other elements in play here when it comes to this new version of the Bloodline as they battle Roman's version, which will, start to come back together now, you would think, sooner rather than later because, we're only, 2.5 months away or so from Survivor Series now. So, things will start to get in motion a little bit more. We know it'll escalate even further whenever we get to Bad Blood. So, I think this is, it's a big match to do. And I think now it opens up the question, what does Cody do at Bad Blood? Does he wrestle there? You would think this is an Atlanta show. So you would think Cody has to be a big presence on that show. Wrestling, I would fully expect that to happen. It's just a matter of what matches he's going to have, right? And we talked about the possibilities. Do you do Cody versus Jacob Fatu there? Do you do a tag team situation where maybe Cody's teaming up with Roman Reigns or someone else? Or is there the scenario where you get back to Cody versus Kevin Owens, and maybe Owens has turned at that point? You didn't really get any indication of that on this particular show, but I think, that is something that is at least in the cards, where you do have several options for Cody coming out of next week's match against Solo. But again, it really is all about what's going to happen maybe at the end of the match or after the match that everyone's going to have their attention on. It's okay to do that on a TV show versus an actual PLE. I'm fine with that. Weekly television has been used for decades to push, bigger matches down the road and those kind of things. So the fact that they're going back to Cody versus Solo may not be for everyone, but I'm okay with it because they're doing it on SmackDown. They're not doing it at Bad Blood, and I just think that's the better scenario to get you to an even bigger match for Cody, after that. So they're definitely, you would fully expect Raw next week. They got Bret Hart on Raw next week. You've got some big matches for Raw. They're definitely trying to load up these shows because, WWE Week or whatever they're calling it, that's kind of the plan. So I would think SmackDown, which kind of needs a bit of a restart, I think, at this point, because as we talk about everything else on SmackDown, we mentioned Kevin Owens. He's got the stuff with Grayson, Waller, and Austin Theory, but it's really more about Waller and Theory than it is Owens, right? And their continued tension between those two. And then you had the scenario where Waller and Theory get a little overconfident after attacking Owens after the match. And so they want Owens to have a partner for next week, right? I mean, listen, my number one choice probably for the partner would be someone who, as we remember, is still on the SmackDown brand, even though he just challenged for the World Heavyweight Championship on Raw, and that is Randy Orton. You would think this is a spot for Orton to come back into things, but maybe you guys have another prediction for who Kevin Owens teams up with next week. They sort of left it as a mystery, but you also wonder, was that done on purpose just because you have the overconfident heels here in Waller and Theory, forgetting that Randy Orton is actually still out there because he just went to Raw for a little while to challenge Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. We've got to remember he's a SmackDown superstar. So I think, that would make the most sense, even though we have seen that match before, right? But still, you could see it kind of playing out that way to get Orton back on SmackDown, give him his return. And because, again, it's a big show next week with the SmackDown on USA debut. So Theory and Waller are going to turn on each other at some point, but it's kind of been the slow burn here to see when that actually happens. So you would think after Owens and his partner get the win next week, then maybe we have a much more clear direction as to where Owens is headed moving forward, and Randy Orton as well, if Orton is indeed the partner, or if it's someone else, we'll see. But LA Knight had two challengers step up to him, and then we remembered, these two are actually tied still in Andrade and Carmelo Hayes. Those two still tied at 2-2. We'll get the tiebreaker match between the two next week. You would assume they're going 5 matches and not 7 here, and you would, again, also assume that the winner is going to face LA Knight. I guess they could always do a triple threat match or something like that, but you had both guys kind of step up, make their claim the United States title, which we kind of expected. We knew it would probably be the winner of this series to be the next person to challenge. I said I thought Carmelo probably made the most sense. He gets down 2-0 in the series, makes a big comeback, wins it. If that's how they're going, then I think Carmelo is a fine challenger for LA Knight for the next go-around. But as we talk about with these titles, right, it's just you just don't see LA Knight losing the title anytime soon necessarily, and you kind of have to find a way to build up challenge, legitimate challenges for him, and we'll see if either one of these guys can prove to be that here. But somebody I don't think is going to be challenging for the United States title anytime soon, that's Giovanni Vinci, who may have been the most, controversial is probably not the right word, but one of the most talked about parts of SmackDown was the fact that they debut Giovanni Vinci here, who's been having the vignettes over the past several weeks or month or whatever it's been, and he comes in, and my man gets a little overconfident right off the bat. And what happens? The bell rings, and Apollo Crews rolls him up in about 5 seconds and beats him. So that probably was not exactly the debut that most people expected for a returning superstar and someone who, as we know, kind of broke away from Imperium with Gunther and Ludwig Kaiser, and now he's on his own. And the first thing that happens to him, outside of just these vignettes he's been taping, is he gets beat by Apollo Crews in 5 seconds or whatever it was. So probably, the comedic route is never a great idea if you're someone who's trying to challenge for championships immediately. So I don't really know how Vinci's going to settle in to the mid-card here on SmackDown, but probably not exactly the start that most people expected. The theme music was just pretty bland. You just didn't really get, maybe that extra something you thought you would with the way they built him up with the video packages and all that. So not exactly sure where Giovanni Vinci heads from here. Probably won't be the U.S. title. Don't think it's going to be the world title, but we'll see. It's SmackDown, and again, I think the mid card there, it is a work in progress. I think with really a lot of things on SmackDown, and you kind of hope that as we go into the SmackDown and USA Network thing, they're going to make this a big thing for the first several weeks, month, whatever. You kind of hope SmackDown doesn't settle into that B show kind of range. Whereas I think some people would certainly look at it that way over the past little bit. But I mean, I think this is a good opportunity to sort of, again, kind of kickstart things and really, push some new ideas and new things they can do for SmackDown. But, elsewhere, we'll run through the other stuff quickly. Again, there wasn't a lot on the show. Bayley beat Tiffany Stratton. Nia Jax said she was going to help Tiffany the same way Tiffany helped her, and we knew what was going to happen there. Nia accidentally cost Tiffany the match by being on the, apron to distract the referee just long enough that Tiffany cannot get the pin on Bayley. Bayley kicks out at 2, and then it turns the other way. So, again, just continue to tease the tension there. The Money in the Bank briefcase is still the device that matters the most in that scenario, and we know we'll get back to those potential cash-ins and all that with Tiffany Stratton, and I think that's only going to build to when it does actually happen. It makes it a much bigger moment. So it's just something that, again, is moving along, just kind of at a slow pace, but that's kind of where we are with that story right now. Chelsea Green beat Meechin, so you had some other kind of undercard stuff that, you're building some different stories in with that there. And then, of course, the main event we didn't really talk about. No surprise, the Bloodline got the win in the 8-man tag team match against the Street Profits and DIY. And once again, it's Fatu doing all the heavy lifting. He's doing the work, running wild on everyone, only for Solo to be the one who, takes advantage and gets the pin. So the same theme we've seen before on that. So not really a big surprise, I think, in terms of, how that played out there. So that was SmackDown. I know there's probably a couple things I'm forgetting, but like I said, this will be a little bit of a shorter reaction video than usual. But really, it is still all about, Cody Rhodes, the Bloodline, and those stories that are playing out. We'll see if maybe adding Randy Orton back into the mix next week kind of, again, reinvigorates some other things on the show as it pertains to Cody and Kevin Owens and such. So we'll see if that happens. But yeah, that's kind of where we are right now for SmackDown. And want to know what you guys thought of this week's edition. As always, be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out as well. What do you think is going to happen in this big steel cage match with Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa? And what else do you want to see on next week's SmackDown on USA Network debut? Let me know your thoughts. And again, appreciate you guys watching as always, and let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE SmackDown.